BookTube. I'm the inconsistent reader here, and I'm back with part 9, Sackcloth. We're back with Aunt Lydia, who is now in her brown sackcloth roby thing, and she's once again placed in front of Commander Judd. However, this time she's allowed to sit of her own accord. And he tells her that she was only given level 1 treatment, and did she feel enlightened? And she answers, like, the right answer, of course. And then, anyway, he then starts talking shit about how she's had an abortion. And didn't she know they could send her to death just for that because their law is retroactive? Also, she wasted her body and didn't do her only duty as a woman, which was to have babies. She was too focused on her career. Then he asks her if she's with them or if she's against them. To which, of course, she replied with them, knowing the alternative was probably death. So Commander Judd's like, okay, prove it. Can you guess what the loyalty test was? Yep, murdering a blindfolded woman. Because what could be a better show of loyalty than murdering a disobedient woman? And I quote, "This was Commander Judd's test. Fail it, and your commitment to the one true way would be voided. Pass it, and blood was on your hands. As someone once said, we must all hang together, or we will all hang separately." I did show some weakness. I threw up afterwards. One of the women on the chopping block was her friend Anita, which made Lydia sad, of course. And this means Anita either said no to this shit, or she was found to be useless. I prefer to believe it's the first one. I want to believe that it was her choice to die rather than submit. Fuck Gilead. Fuck the fucking patriarchy. After having to murder someone, Aunt Lydia meets the other founder aunts, Elizabeth, Helena, and Vidala. And I quote, "Some might call the overthrowing of an illegitimate government an act of treason. Now that you have joined us, it is the same thought that others will have about you. But loyalty to a higher truth is not treason, for the ways of God are not the ways of man, and they are most emphatically not the ways of woman." Let's discuss. What a fucking prick. Like, most emphatically not the ways of woman? So he's saying, well, men's ways are not the ways of God. Woman's ways are worse. I'll say it before, and I'll say it again. Who hurt you, man? Look, I have daddy issues myself. He was hardly around when I was growing up, and when he did show up, he wasn't a good father. He once told me he didn't owe me anything, and all I could think of was, yes, you do. You owe me a father. Anyways, I digress. My point is, yes, I have an unfair distrust for all men, but I don't hate them. I don't think less of all men because of the actions of a few. We need to stop blanket judging people based on our experiences with the same type of person from our past. Not everyone is the same, not one race, not one gender. Meanwhile, Aunt Vidala must already be in the loop because she's in a snazzy black uniform and she's got this smirk on her face while Commander Judd's talking. And Aunt Lydia's just sitting there trying not to react to anything being said. And I quote, "It's a skill, not reacting." She's right, because I do not have that skill. I have a very expressive face, and I have the hardest time not reacting genuinely in the moment. And I quote, "We have seen the results of too much laxity. Absence of meaningful structures. our birth rate for various reasons, but most significantly through the selfish choices of women, is in free fall. Let's discuss. This asshole really hates women. Our selfish choices have caused infertility? Really, buttface? I could not just sit there and let him spout this misogynistic bullshit. You have a penis and that makes you better how? Because you don't feel things deeply? Sad. I would have gone the route of Anita. I am not good at revenge served cold. I am way too hot-headed. But then again, who the fuck actually knows unless they're placed in this crazy-ass situation? I just know my flight instinct is super strong and much higher than my fight instinct. Unless I'm drunk. So they're all sitting there in this meeting, and Aunt Lydia's like, "What do you want?" To which Judd replies, and I quote, "You are all intelligent women. Through your former," he did not want to say professions, "through your former experiences, you are familiar with the lives of women. You know how they're likely to think. We would expect you to be spiritual guides and mentors, leaders, so to speak, within your womanly sphere. Simply put," he continued, "we want you to help us organize the separate sphere, the sphere for women." So apparently they know they can't corral women without the help of women. Gender traders. Women manipulating other women to do the bidding of men. Now, we know Lydia's doing all this for her own ends, just waiting for her opportunity to blow it all up. But what about the others? Especially Aunt Vidala. She is one of those bitches who's like, yeah, women are weak and need to be controlled. But says it like she's not a woman. Which means she's one of those bitches who's like, I do what I'm told, so I don't need to be controlled, but everybody else does. Like, this is how I feel conservative women are. They're like, I'm perfect and I don't need to do anything wrong, but we need to control all the other bitches. Anyway, Aunt Lydia is saying how we've been told equality is possible. So it's going to be hard to break women. So we've been told equality is possible, to which Judd replies, and I quote, "It is always a cruelty to promise them equality, since by their nature they can never achieve it. We have already begun the merciful task of lowering their expectations." Whatever those words mean. So he tells them they'll have to create the laws for women. They'll be given a budget and a base of operations to run things. So our bold Aunt Lydia's like, well, if this is truly going to be a separate female space, no men can be allowed in, ever. They should only be judged by their actions of what they're producing. And I quote, "Though we will, of course, report to the authorities if and when it's necessary." Commander Judd agrees, within reason, he says. Aunt Vidala, however, articulates her displeasure with the idea by saying, and I quote, "Women are weak vessels." She goes on to say some other shit, but Judd cuts her off and he replies, and I quote, "Men have better things to do than concern themselves with the petty details of the female sphere." And thus begins the rivalry between Vidala and Lydia. And I quote, "If it's a hen yard," I thought, "I intend to be alpha hen." See, Aunt Vidala is blinded by her ideology, which makes her rigid in her thinking. But Lydia's more flexible in her thoughts, so she feels she has the advantage over her. Which is good because she's the one that's, like, she's butting heads with the most. Aunt Helena is unsure of herself, and therefore it'll be easier to steer her in whatever direction Lydia wants. Aunt Elizabeth is a snob, so she'll underestimate Lydia. And I quote, "Divide and conquer would be my motto." So they start making laws, slogans, uniforms, and hymns, to which Judd takes all the credit for, with the other commanders, of course. And Lydia's feeling proud of all they've accomplished, but she's also feeling shitty for having to, reversing equality. I mean, I'm sure that's hard to live with, you know, if you have a soul. Aunt Lydia's resolve for revenge is astounding. And I quote, "Better to hurl rocks than to have them hurled at you." They knew that so well, the architects of Gilead. Their kind has always known that. Right? Because after all, might makes right. Right? So true, that fucking motto. Might makes right. Not that that's true. It's stupid. Just because you can make someone do something under the threat of pain doesn't mean you should. Might makes right may rhyme, but that doesn't make it right. In this day and age, don't we know coercion is not okay? It's never okay. Commander Judd told her way later, after she had amassed her own power, that her rifle contained a blank. He told her because he was scared of her, and he's worried at this point that she's going to use her knowledge against him. So this guy actually apologized for how she was treated in the beginning of this. And I quote, "Aunts are like shadows, their own shadows, fearsome to others, but not to them." So Aunt Vidala comes up and tells her that she wants to talk to Aunt Lydia about her statue. And she's saying how the offerings being left is close to cult worship and it needs to be stopped and punished. And since there is no rule against it, there needs to be a rule. To which Aunt Lydia replies, and I quote, "I will certainly consider it. And the appropriate punishment. These things need to be tactfully done." But Aunt Vidala also wants to tell her she has seen Aunt Elizabeth leaving boiled eggs at her statue. And I quote, "Evidence? I thought Elizabeth had merely been eating those eggs. This was a more creative use for them. I was quite proud of her." I love Lydia. So Aunt Vidala tells Aunt Lydia that she thinks Aunt Elizabeth is trying to denounce Lydia, and she thinks Elizabeth is the rat for May Day. And she came to Aunt Lydia and also apologized for having doubted her leadership abilities. This was an interesting development for Aunt Lydia to hear because, I mean, they're rivals and she's always been, like, against everything, you know? And she said she'd take those suspicions to Commander Judd. And I quote, "Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Having no friends, I must make do with enemies." Aunt Lydia is so good at deception. It's scary, isn't it? Like, anyway, that's the end of this section. Next up is Baby Nicole in Carpets with a Z. And it's a bit longer than the last two sections. Anyway, thanks for watching me, the inconsistent reader. Do you like my earrings? I made them. Anyway, as always, make good choices. Bye.